It's time for another episode of Espresso Yourself with Chuck. And now, coming to the mic, your host, Chuck.
Today, I have Ashley Bowen Cook, President of Greteman Group, and also the chair of the Wichita Aero Club with us. Welcome, Ashley, to Espresso Yourself with Chuck.
Thanks for having me, Chuck.
Well, this is exciting for a couple of reasons. One, you are a very accomplished person. The Greteman Group is a premier marketing agency, creative agency in Wichita. But my personal history with Ashley goes back to actually around my senior year. Her parents offered me my first paying job to help out around their place. So I got to mow and odd jobs like that. So it was great, great family. Ashley obviously was a very young child at the time, but even then was very polite, and you could tell she was going to do big things, and you have. So tell us a little bit, Ashley, about your youth growing up and maybe when you thought you knew what you wanted to do with your life.
Yes, well, thank you for that introduction, Chuck. And yeah, I was talking with my husband about, it's funny when a networking relationship goes back 40 years, and he was like, 40 years? And I said, well, yeah, I was like 5 or 6 when I met Chuck. So, I guess just to set the stage. So I grew up like Chuck in a small town east of Wichita, a bedroom community called Augusta, Kansas, population under 10,000, one middle school, one high school. Really fortunate to grow up in a community like that, especially looking back. I think we probably didn't realize how lucky we were having a small knit community where people really supported each other. And to your point, Chuck, like with the job with my folks, it was like reaching out to the high school and, hey, what kids need some jobs? And, oh, these are good kids and they're hard workers. And so let's extend this relationship. That was a good foundation for me. I'm also really fortunate in that my amazing husband of 20 years, almost 21 years, is from the same hometown. And so we're able to instill a lot of those values that we learned there in both our home life and our business. But after, I was kind of your traditional all-American kid, mostly A's in school, student council president, dance team, that kind of thing. And so again, I think when you're in a smaller town like that, you have those unique opportunities that you don't have in a bigger school. And so I'm, again, very grateful that we had that chance to have all that exposure to really find out what our interests were as we grew up. I talk a lot with students about you've got to find out as much what you like in life as what you don't like in life to help direct yourself. So from there, I went to the University of Kansas, Rock Chalk Jayhawk.
Rock Chalk.
And I actually had no idea what I wanted to major in. And so I was really just taking my basic courses those first couple of years. And my dad said, well, you really like to talk. And so maybe you should try the communications route. And so I did. I went into the School of Journalism. The William Allen White School of Journalism is a really well-known program, and majored in business communications. So essentially media relations, PR. And really, that was, well, gosh, I graduated in 2000. So that was, 23 years ago. So the program has changed considerably and what they offer. But at the time, you segmented off into what you wanted to focus in. And from there, I spent time during the summers. I interned at Bombardier Learjet for a friend of my dad's in the PR department. And I was really fortunate in that relationship of my dad's gave me the entry into that first job. But it was because I was able to prove myself that first summer, I was asked back 2 more times. And so I think that's really important, for students to remember, and really, I mean, anybody in the workforce to remember, you may get that foot in the door, but you have to get in and prove yourself. And generally speaking, if you do, the opportunities will continue to present themselves. So from there, went to work for a sister company of Bombardier's called Bombardier FlexJet. It was a fractional business jet program down in Dallas, and my husband and I lived down there for a couple of years, and then he had the opportunity to move back here, and so we moved back. And at the time, I was actually on the client side of Greteman Group for FlexJet. And so I basically was able to then just switch over to the agency side from my old boss. And that's how I started here as a brand manager. And then over the last 20 years, I've just worked my way up. I started working on business development about 10 years ago. And then from there went on to just, increase responsibilities. And then in the beginning of the year, transferred over to being president of the organization.
And that was a big announcement earlier this year. I think since January 1st, you've been president, but as you said, worked your way up through the organization literally over about the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you came in as, were you an account exec with Greteman Group initially, or what was your first role?
Yes. So my first, account executive, brand manager, just different titles depending on how the agency has evolved. But yes. So, in that type of a role, my job was to be the liaison between the client and the agency, and with all the projects that the client had going, and basically just have a daily pulse to keep the rest of the team informed. And as a liaison, you have to make the client happy, but you also have to keep the agency happy and balance the workload with what the client expectations are. And so you're constantly working those two relationships to make sure that you get what the client needs. And so I did that for a long time. I had clients everywhere. Most of my clients were in aviation. Again, since that's my background with Bombardier and with my dad and growing up in the industry. But I also had some others. I had a banking client at one time, which was really interesting to learn about all the regulatory issues that you have to deal with there. But day-to-day operations of just those particular clients. And then again, as things went on, then I started adding business development. So where you're talking about giving presentations and preparing, decks to present the offerings of the agency to clients.
What did you find most challenging, managing the relationships or doing the creative part?
Oh, that's a great question. So honestly, I would say it varies by situation. Sometimes in this industry, just to give a little bit of background on what it's like to work with an agency. Oftentimes a client will come to us because either they have a small internal team or they have no internal team really at all, in order to, execute just everything from overall branding and strategy all the way down to, making updates on PowerPoints and one sheets and different collateral that they need. So it really runs the gamut, depending on the client. So with that, your job as an agency is to really find out how the client can best utilize the resource of an agency to help maximize their marketing. And sometimes you're sometimes only dealing with one person, and that makes it a pretty seamless process. And other times you're dealing with a committee of people, and that can make it a lot more challenging because all of those people want to put their stamp on that project and add some personalization to it. And not everybody always agrees. And so sometimes your job in that role is to act as a little bit of a mediator, or, okay, well, let's talk about this. What are we really trying to accomplish here? Are you willing to give in on that, or is that really the best approach to accomplish our goal?
And what prepared you best for the role of working with clients and mediating? And because I don't know, at least when I was at KU, there was really never a class that taught that. So how did you best prepare for that role or that skill as part of your job?
Yeah, that is a great question. And you are correct. There is no class, or it wasn't at the time, to prepare you. So it was very new to me. So I think that's where, when you're in the workplace, finding a mentor to cling to, finding that person that's 5, 10, 15 years ahead of you in the role, and looking to them as an example of what to do and what are those best practices. We're very fortunate here in that we had a vice president who basically oversaw the brand managers and also created sort of a gold standard for us to work off of. And so when new people would join the team, they could look at this gold standard of, at least to give them some guidelines for how to interact with a client. And then, but definitely that one-on-one in-person mentoring, and just watching what people that have more experience than you do, and learning what to do and what not to do, and how to make that your own. That, I think, is truly the best way to learn. There are some jobs out there that you can prepare for, just through school, but I would say the vast majority, you need that hands-on experience and mentoring to really help make you the best you can be at your job.
You mentioned you basically grew up in the aviation industry. You referenced him, but your dad is Paul Bowen, internationally acclaimed aviation photographer. I didn't know that at the time when I was working for you all, but he has done some pretty incredible things, and you grew up around that. Did you intentionally not want to go into photography or aviation because of that? I mean, tell me how that played into what you decided to do, because you said when you went to KU, you really weren't sure initially, and then, kind of got on the path you are. So how did that all work out in your life?
Yes. So, when growing up, I mean, it was just dad's job, and I didn't really think much of it. I mean, I knew that he was gone a lot, and, traveling to amazing places and taking beautiful photos, and that it was really cool, and that people were always like, oh, your dad's work's so cool, but I mean, for most of the part, he was just dad. And so the older I got and realized, oh, okay, he's pretty influential in this industry. And I would say probably typical teenager in that, I want to strike out on my own. I don't need to ride my dad's coattails. I would like to go, blaze my own trail. And so when I was in college, I started in retail because I thought that was like the holy grail of what to do at the time. Why, I'm not sure. I quickly learned after a summer of working at the Gap that basically my whole paycheck was gone because I spent it on all the clothes. I worked terrible hours, and I had to listen to the same songs on repeat all day long, and those songs are forever ruined for me. So I quickly realized that was not my path in life, as cool as it sounded. Then I would say after that, I basically, coming home each summer from KU, finally my dad was like, I think you probably need to get an internship or some kind of real job for the summer. And that's honestly how it started, was just, he said, hey, you think you want to go into communications? I have a friend who is the head of public relations for Learjet. He's willing to let you tag along for the summer. Just go see what you think. So again, you can find out if this is what you want to do or not want to do. And, I'm incredibly grateful to both my dad and to my mentor, Dave Franson, for giving me that opportunity. And because they completely came up with that on their own, I didn't ask for it. And so, as far as staying in aviation, I thought, oh, I'm getting a lot of cool experience. And after the first summer, I thought, this is actually pretty interesting, but I don't know that this is what I want to do. I don't know that I want to walk around the factory taking photos, writing a newsletter. But I also didn't understand that, I think at the time, that there was so much more to the job, and there were so many more opportunities within aviation that I didn't realize at the time. And so, by the time my third summer rolls around and I'm getting ready to graduate from KU, I said, you know what, I'm getting out of Wichita. It's time to leave. It's time to go to Kansas City or Chicago or Dallas or someplace. So I went to Kansas City. I interviewed for a handful of jobs, and they all sounded horrible. And in the meantime, my boss from Learjet calls me and tells me about this opportunity in Dallas. And he said, I think this is exactly what you're wanting. And it was an events coordinator for Bombardier FlexJet. So essentially, I got to travel, which I love to travel. I got to go organize events. I loved doing that at one point in my career, just the logistics and preparing and then executing, and then being able to debrief afterward. And so I thought, well, I'll apply. What's the harm? And I ended up 2 weeks later moving to Dallas. And then I just fell in love with it. And I thought, oh, this will be, I think in my mind, it was like, this will be a short stint. This will be good for my resume. It's an events planning job. I can then springboard from this into like a bigger events planning job. At one point, I think even while I was working there, I applied for an events planner at a big resort there in Dallas, thinking that's what I want to do instead. And then just at some point, it just hooked me. And, I don't know if the turning point was this or not, but in my first year of working is when 9/11 happened. And, I think for those of us who were just out of college, that was such a pivotal moment in our lives. And what do we want to do? Where do we want to go? Our world has just been shaken. And it gave us a moment to pause and reevaluate at an age where we might not have done that otherwise.
Right. You mentioned brand manager as your first job, but I know there are a lot of jobs in a creative agency. Some of our students
Yes.
may be wondering what other occupations or what other talents are needed. Can you tell us a little bit more about what jobs you have at the Greteman Group and the types of folks you're looking for?
Yes, there are many jobs, and I think there are many jobs for many personalities. I'm a talker. I like people. I'm pretty extroverted. That's not everybody, but that's also not everybody that we need at an agency. It's okay. Introverts can find their place here just as much as extroverts. And I think in terms of the actual jobs, we have copywriters, we have graphic designers, we have production artists, we have production managers who basically act as kind of like the air traffic controller and move the schedules around and all the parts and pieces to make sure everything falls in line when it's supposed to. We have the brand managers, we have strategy, we have user experience when it comes to websites. So somebody, looking at an old website and saying, oh, here's what doesn't work, here's what we need to do and fix it for the new website. We have people that handle metrics, search engine optimization. There are people that just, if you like to nerd out on data, especially because of this being a digital world, there are so many opportunities for you in agency life or even just as a freelancer to provide those services to an agency, people that can translate data from kind of geek speak into something that a CEO or a VP of marketing can understand and then make changes on is a huge asset.
Tell us about your current job as president of Greteman Group. And then which job have you enjoyed the most at Greteman Group?
That's a tough.
I know it's like picking a favorite child, I'm sure.
Right. Let's see. Okay, so my current role as president is I oversee operations, which means everything from human resources to just making sure that things are running smoothly within the agency, that all of our clients are taken care of, and that kind of high level overview of the agency. Then I also handle business development, which means I'm actively seeking new clients, going after new business. If somebody reaches out to us and needs a proposal, wants to understand what Greteman Group's capabilities are about, I handle that. And it's kind of a process. I start those initial phone calls, I do some vetting, I do presentations, and then at some point I'll bring in a brand manager for an introduction, and then I switch things over to the brand manager to be the day-to-day person, but then I still float in and out of strategy for all of our clients. So it's important that I have a good overview of everything that's going on. I don't need to know all the details, and it's almost, if I did know the details, I actually probably wouldn't be doing my job because it'd be bogging me down from other things that I need to take care of. So that's really that brand manager's responsibility. But at the same time, I need to know overall what's happening across the board.
So yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to let you finish the question. Go ahead.
So in terms of my favorite role, that's really tough. So I love interacting with our clients. I love having a seat at the table with our clients. I'm often asked to go to sales and marketing meetings with our clients and really be at the table where I get to hear about their business goals. And I think that's something that's really changed over the years since I've been at the agency, because it's just changed in marketing in general, is that, back when I started, it was a beautiful direct mail piece and it had a fax form with it. And if the client got a bunch of fax forms returned, they were thrilled. That was, because that meant some leads were coming in and people were interested. Now, again, back to the data, everything's digitally tracked. There needs to be metrics and KPIs. And so in order to do that, now it's having a deeper relationship as an agency with our clients to where we really understand, okay, here are the business goals from a quarterly and yearly and even 3 and 5 year outlook. So that we can understand how marketing can support those goals.
Obviously, you have to keep up with the times and technology. For our students who may be considering marketing, advertising, what advice would you give them to get started and then to be able to move up and grow within that field or a company?
I would say, again, data is king. And so anything that you can learn about Google Analytics or just looking at data and analyzing it to, again, be able to provide recommendations. Search engine optimization is really important. And just understanding too how marketing is evolving. I think there are so many wonderful blogs and resources out there that you can just keep apprised of what the latest is. I think doing your homework and being an avid learner is really important because, like you said, it's changing all the time. So you have to be constantly searching for new information. I think there's also learning about things, taking a little bit deeper dive into things that, again, we didn't used to think about all that much from an agency standpoint, but things like a CRM, like, your HubSpots, your Salesforces, understanding how those integrate into marketing as well, because that's, again, a source of data and a source of being able to see that sales funnel all the way through. And I would say writing, communication, please, put your phone down and look somebody in the eye and speak to them. I think that speaks volumes when you can. It's one thing to be able to communicate over an email, over chat, over Slack, whatever. It's a whole nother skill set to be able to have a clear line of communication with someone and making sure that they feel confident in what you're saying because of the way you present yourself.
Well, you've obviously been very successful throughout your career, and recently, you'll have to remind me of the date, you were named chairman of the board of the Wichita Aero Club, and also a distinction, the first female to lead the Wichita Aero Club. I think it was primarily because you have many decades of experience in the aviation industry, but it's a distinction that certainly was made and is important. Tell us a little bit about the Wichita Aero Club and what it does, your role as chairman of the board, and what the distinction of being the first female to lead the organization means to you.
So the Wichita Aero Club is based here in Wichita, Kansas, the air capital of the world, and it is meant as a networking resource for those in the aviation community, and also a way to support STEM education within the community. So we have a lot of networking events, lunches, breakfasts, mixers, for people to get to know each other and spend time together within the industry. But then we also give out scholarships to really help that next generation be part of the industry. There is a constant need for new talent to enter the aviation industry, and you would think that it would be easy being here in the air capital, and it's not. And it's not just an issue here; it's an issue worldwide with the aviation industry. Pilot shortages, maintenance shortages, just shortages across the board, because a lot of that was either because of a time of poor pay, and so people decided to go into other industries, and now the pay is where it should be, or from a maintenance standpoint, people deciding to just get more 4-year degrees and go to more white collar office jobs rather than wanting to do more hands-on work. And so there is part of our job is to just make sure people are aware of the opportunities within the industry, educate on the amazing things that are happening here and in, around, really, quite frankly, around the world when it comes to aviation. My role as the board chair is essentially just to work with the president of the organization to kind of make sure that we're getting those events planned, that we're staying on mission, that we're growing the club, and to just make sure that we're seen as a resource for the community.
Outside of the Aero Club and work, do you do something fun that's not related to aviation?
Not often, no. I do spend a lot of time supporting aviation. It's a passion of mine, and it's, in my blood. And so I do really like to support aviation. I have an 8-year-old son. And so a lot of time spent on the soccer field and golf and fishing and lots of I guess I shouldn't say boy, but lots of outdoor adventures. So yes, we that's what we do for fun, is we just try and relax and spend time as a family.
That's great. Well, Ashley, we've appreciated the time you've spent with us.
Yeah.
We have students in the Wichita area. I know you're working with major companies, and I don't know if there are opportunities for young people, high school people, but if someone was in high school and wanted to learn, shadow, find a mentor, what would you, in our closing, what would you recommend to them to get involved as a high school student?
That's a great question. So, I would say for the vast majority of companies, most of them want interns. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, post high school, but in high school, I think the aviation industry itself is a very friendly industry, and people want to help each other and they want to get people excited. We have statistics that show that you need to engage kids at a third grade level in aviation to get them interested enough to want to pursue a career in aviation. And so that being said, if you're a high schooler and you're really interested in shadowing somebody, you can probably find somebody that's willing to let you shadow them. And I think what's great about Wichita in particular is that there are small companies that serve aviation up to the big companies. And so even if there's not an opportunity with a big company, you can definitely find one with a smaller company. I would say, you could certainly reach out to us at the Wichita Aero Club, and we can send things out to the membership and see what opportunities there are there. From a marketing standpoint, I think, again, trying to find opportunities to shadow people is always a good approach. Now, there are some businesses that won't. I know for us, even, we deal with a lot of confidential information. And so it's hard for us to do shadowing days because of that confidential information. But you can certainly approach somebody. I would say most people are willing to have a coffee or, get together in some way, shape, or form to share knowledge of what they do and how you can get involved in the industry.
Great. Well, we will put the website URLs for Greteman Group, and I assume the Wichita Aero Club has a website.
Yes.
So we will make sure that is below as well. Again, thanks for your time. It's great reconnecting. Absolutely. I think we've emailed, text, but we haven't spoken for 40 years or whatever. But
yes,
it's great to see you. Thank you again, and congratulations on all your success.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you having me on. And I would say again, to students and really anybody, build those relationships. Again, this is a perfect example of a relationship that's lasted a long time, and how you can help each other out. Never underestimate the power of being friendly to someone and how far that'll get you. And just, I think, be sure that you treat others with compassion and grace along the way, and don't be afraid to work hard. It's really important to work hard to get what you want. And just, you've got to, in the first half of your career, you've got to say yes to things, like say yes to every opportunity that comes across in the first half of your career, because in the second half of your career, you're going to have to say no to a lot of things because you won't have time to do them. And just, keep that in mind as you progress, because that will get you a long way. And just, I think also, again, with this relationship, like, take time to give back to others. That is such an important thing to do. And you have the opportunity, with whether it's time, talent, or treasure, depending where you are in life, and when you're young, you have all the time in the world to give. When you're, you've worked for a few years, you have the ability to give your talent. And as you get older, you have more treasure to give. And, while you should give that along the way, you definitely have that, more accessible the older you get. So give back in whatever way you can, because it's important. It'll make you a better person, and it'll make you a better employee. And, hopefully one day it'll make you a better boss, and maybe even a parent.
Great advice. Thanks, Ashley.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching Espresso Yourself with Chuck. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you will subscribe to the channel and also check out all the videos on our Jobs for America's Graduates Kansas YouTube site.